I hear you. Yeah, you can hear me. That's a lot of yes. No sound yet. Okay. Yes. Say something. Yeah, I just say something. But the audio, no. Okay, good. That's really good. I really hope no sound for me. Very refreshing page. Okay. So sound is okay. Most of you say that the sound is okay, so I will assume that you can hear me. And you have no sound, maybe try refreshing your page and you will get back the sound. So as I just said, the idea is to present you the new molds that we developed last year. Because of this special situation with the virus, we had much more time than before to develop some new products. And the idea was to reach over 100 type of molds by the end of 2020. That was one of the goals, and that's what we succeeded to do. So maybe just a word about Castle Malting. I think most of you already know this company very well. It's a very old company, and maybe just one thing you should remember about Castle Malting is that it's succeeded its transition from producing just one malt, some Pilsen malt, to about 100 type of malts. So that's why this is still a small company that can survive. It's because it's specialized in specialty malts. Other malting plants that had this site just couldn't survive because they wanted to keep producing Pilsen, but they couldn't be competitive anymore compared to modern malt house. So just in a few numbers, Castle Malting, as I said, it's a very old company. It was founded in 1868. Now we have about 3,500 brewers, and we are exporting a lot of our products. As you can see, it's over 140 countries in which we export. We have now about 100 type of malts. I cannot think about any other malt house that has such a wide product offer. We have two main facilities. So we have the historical malting plant that is dedicated to the production. And since we had no room enough for storage and logistics, we developed another site in Glin, another facility, about 5,000 square meters just for storing bags and make sure you receive your orders. So now our team is about 90 people. So it's quite a company, well, small for a malt house, but still quite big. As I just said, this year, 2020, last year, has been quite a challenge for us to reach this goal of 100 type of molds. I will briefly show you what we did. So here is let's say an overview of what we have now in our catalog. So what we focused at the beginning was to improve, to increase the number of caramelized malts that we have. As you can see, it's written down 5 plus 6. That means that we had 5 caramels and we developed 6 others. I think that's where we had to start because compared to other malt house, we didn't have so much caramels, and still I think that our caramels are quite good. So that was, I think, a good idea to increase this range of product. We also developed organic malts because a lot of brewers are asking for new organic malts. This is, of course, a range that is smaller than the conventional one, but still more and more brewers are developing organic beers. So that's why we added 9 more organic malts compared to the years before. We also added some flakes and raw cereals, as you can see at the bottom right, and also some specialty wheat malts because we noticed that more and more brewers are using specialty some roasted wheat malts. Also 1 new roasted malt and 1 new smoked malt. I will go very briefly through this kind of new product. So first, maybe a word about the process. Well, I think most of you know about the malting process. It's quite simple. Well, I would say in principle, it's quite simple. It goes through 3 steps: steeping, germination, and kilning. At Castle Malting, it's 2-4-2, so meaning that we go through 2 days of steeping, 4 days of germination, then 2 days of kilning. Why 2 days for kilning? It's because we have a double deck kiln, and we use that to recover as much energy as we can. So we will have another webinar about that, but basically you always have 2 batch in the kiln, and we are recovering the energy from the last batch to the next one for drying. So being specialized in specialty malts means that we need to have some cutting edge roasters. If you only have a kiln, you cannot produce much specialty malts. So we have mainly two roasting technology. The one on the left of the picture, called Castle 8000, is I will say like other malt house. It's roasting drums, but 2 roasting drums that are working together. That's why it's very special in our place. That's because we recover the energy from one drum to send it to the other. And also, as you can see upstairs, behind the yellow fence, we have a vessel that is dedicated to prepare the malt before to send it to the roasters, also the green malt. So it's especially used for car malts. So this is quite a small roaster, but that has been dedicated to produce very high quality specialty malts. The one on the right is not common in other malt houses. Some of malt houses have this kind of roasters, but it's quite rare, I will say. So that's an electrical roaster. So as you can see, it's a kind of tube. It's a tube, a metal tube, and it's acting like an electrical resistance. So the product, green malt, it could be a Pilsen malt to produce a Cara or roasted malt, will go through the tube, moving from the bottom to the top by vibration. And the tube is heating, so it will roast or caramelize the product. And its technology, it's based on green energy because we have about 1 megawatt of solar, of photovoltaic panels on the top. So it's like 10,000 square meters of photovoltaic panels. That's quite huge. So what did we develop last year? Well, a lot of caramelized malt. I will show you the list here. So in green are the one that I think you all know because we have been commercializing these 5 caramelized malts for years now. And we added 6 new caramelized malt in red. You can see the colorations are kind of filling the gaps in the range that we already had. So we have, for example, this Cara Belga malt that is between the blonde and the ruby. Then between the ruby and the gold, we have the ambra and the aroma. And so the idea was to fill the gaps in coloration, but also to provide malts that had a new aroma profile. So now we have quite a large range, I will say, of caramelized malts. Just to remind you about the process, the way we produce caramels is that we go through steeping, germination, and at the end of the germination, we send the green malt directly to the roasting drums. We don't send it to the kiln. There is no, I would say, drying phase. We work with a very humid product that is able to caramelize in the roasters. Yeah, I think most of you are used to it. That's an aroma wheel. We have this project to develop this kind of aroma wheel for most of our products. So I think that it will be available soon enough. Takes time. So here is an aroma wheel for 2 caramel malts. So here are the product that we developed. I think you can see the specs here about the colors, about the aroma, about the percentage we recommend for you to use in your mash bill. So it's just the kind of information you can easily find on our website. So everything is available online on Castle Malting website. Maybe just a word about the coloration range. It has been quite a challenge to decide what kind of coloration we will do for the new caramelized malts. We decided not to go beyond this 400 dBc or 450 because if you go beyond that limit, I think it's really hard to caramelize a product while avoiding some coffee notes that are due to Maillard reactions. So that's why we call it Cara Café. That's, I will say, the trade-off between the caramelized flavors and the coffee flavors. From these malts, you can get both of these categories of flavors, but if you really want to focus on the caramelized flavors, well, it's important to go below that kind of colors. Also, yeah, we have another webinar dedicated to caramel malts, so we'll not talk much about that, but don't forget that beyond the flavors and the colors that you will bring to the beer with these malts, you can also really improve your add retention and the add formation of your beer. So these kind of malts can also be used for technical purposes. We very often receive questions on our website, well, on our address. It's down info@castlemalting.com. We often receive questions about caramel malts. So if you have some questions like that, even if it's about your own recipe, we can help you to get through your problems or to help you to design your own recipe. We have experienced brewers like Gabriel working with us to solve your problems. So roasted malts and roasted barley. As you can see, there is only one new malt in this category. That's because we had nothing, in fact, before our Chateau Café and our Chateau Chocolat. So there was this 500 EBC gap with no specific flavor profile related to a malt between these two. So what we decided to do was to create a Chateau Light. So that I will say it's a kind of it's a perfect middle ground between the Chateau Café and the Chateau Chocolat, because you will get some flavors from the Chateau Chocolat, well, that are related to the Chateau Chocolat, but you won't get too much bitterness. So if you are hesitating between the Chateau Café and the Chateau Chocolat, I will say it will be better to go for a Chocolat Light because it's in the middle. And just to remind you about the process, well, it's quite different compared to the caramelized malts, because what we do is that basically we produce a Pilsen or a pale malt after steeping, germination, and kilning. And then we use this base malt in our roasting drums or a roasting tower, and then we roast it. So it's quite different compared to the caramelized malt process. So here is the technical information about the Chateau Chocolat Light. As I said, for the others, it's available on the website. So just go on castlemalting.com and you will find all this information. Specialty smoked malts. Well, we doubled the range. As you can see, we switched from 1 to 2 products. So we only had barley smoked malt. So we added the wheat smoked malt. The coloration is the same for both malts. It's obviously not the same because it's wheat, it's not barley, so it needs to be taken into account regarding your protein profile and everything in your process. And something I can add also about these Chateau wheat smoked is that if you're looking for very strong smoked flavors, it's better to use this wheat smoked compared to our barley smoked malt because we measured the phenols and we produced about 15 ppm in the wheat smoked against 5 ppm in the barley smoked. So you will reach stronger flavors, well, smoked flavors using this wheat smoked. About the flakes and the raw cereals, that was a huge thing that was clearly missing in our catalog because we were often asked by brewers to have this kind of products. So now I think it's done. We added 4 of them. Well, they are not even all here. Of them are missing. It's something that need to be edited. Well, basically we only had barley and wheat flakes, but we decided to add maize, oat, and rice flakes. So much more flakes for you to play with. And also we decided to add raw cereals like oat. We also added raw barley, and we intend to add raw wheat as well, because there was this trend about high PA beers, and it's kind of coming to a end. And we noticed that brewers are more and more interested into sour beers, for example, and the brewers were asking to add some raw cereals to our product offer. So that's what we are doing, just to follow the trend and to make sure that you can realize any kind of recipe with the products that we have in our malt house. So here are the specs about the raw oat and the flakes. I will not go into the details of these specifications because Gabriel is going to talk to you about the use of these flakes and adjuncts. Again, if you have a question about the use of these flakes and adjuncts, you can send these questions directly to our email address. We noticed that some brewers, they might, depending on maybe the countries or the habits that they had for brewing, they are not used sometimes to use flakes and adjuncts, and they don't know how to adapt the process sometimes with this kind of products. So if you have question about that, you can directly email them. Wheat malts, that's also a big trend that we noticed among brewers, is that brewers tend to use more and more specialty wheat malts. So we already had 5 wheat malts, so going from basic one to the base malts to the very roasted one like the wheat chocolate. And we decided to add 2 other very aromatic wheat malts. So we had the wheat arôme and the wheat café. These are the 2 new ones. And maybe another one is the Chateau Emmer. The Chateau Emmer is on the left side. It's we put that into the wheat range of products, but it's good to know that it's an ancient wheat. In fact, it's trichocum dichocum, so it's not like the others. You will get less gluten, you will get more minerals, I would say, from this kind of malt. It's quite original. So if you're in a quest for brewing a very original beer, I will suggest you to try this one. Also, if you want to brew a beer with less gluten, it could be of interest to you. Here the Chateau Café. Talk about that one also. So the organic malts, we have here a table showing what's new. It's quite a lot of new products. As you can see, there are 9 new organic malts. Some of them that are just malts that we already had in the, I would say, conventional version. But as we received more and more demand from the brewers to add them as organic, we finally did it. But some others, as you can see, the Cara Arôme and the Cara Cristal, even the Cara Café, these are malts that are quite new in both the conventional and the organic version. So it's about 41 different organic malts. I think you can look in the catalog of other malt houses. You won't be able to find such a wide range of products. So if you like to brew organic beers, well, that's I think you know where to go. So well, I finished my part. It's basically about explaining the colors that we provide at Castle Malting, and as a friend like to say, the painting is up to you. So more and more colors for you to play. Now I will let Gabriel explain you the tips to use these specialty malts and Belgian Saison beer.
Thank you, Jill. Can you hear me?
Good. Yeah, we can hear you, but we cannot see you anymore.
Cannot see me anymore. Let me see what I did wrong. What about now?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So I turn off the camera. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for your presentation. It was very nice. I'm going to introduce myself again, because right in the beginning of the webinar, I was disconnected for some reason. My name is Gabriel. I am one of the brewers of Castle Malting, and I normally run the support, technical support. And if you have any problems in your process, or you need any tips on how to use the malts, you can contact us and I can help you. And now I'm going to present a few tips on how and why to use specialty malts and brewing adjuncts to design different beers. So, but before I move forward, I'd like to remember, if you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask on the Q&A section of our chat. Once the presentation is done, we're going to take a look at them and answer all of them. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing that I would like to say is that to share an idea is how to design the grain bill of a beer. This is one of the most important steps of designing a beer, and of course also the choice of hops and yeast, the different yeast to perform the fermentation. It's very important to design the beer as well, but the right choice of the malts are going to impact on the color, on the aroma, on the mouthfeel of that beer. So it's crucial to design any type of good beer, especially in a malty beer, or even for a very hoppy beer like IPA styles. Is very important to have a good malt bill to balance those hoppy and bitterness to get a good beer. So once we're designing the grain bill, we normally use 2 types of different malts. We use a base malt and use the specialty malt. So the base malt will give us most of the contents of the mash, give us the starch, the enzymes to convert the starch into sugars. And while the specialty malts are going to give us different colors, different aromas, different flavors. And the quality of those two are very important to the beer process and to get a good beer in the end. The base malt, you have to have a good, well-modified malt with a good, great extract yield, good level of proteins to help in the body of the beer, to help with the foam formation and nutrients to the yeast. Also, you need to have low levels of glucans to do not impact the process, the brewing process that much, especially the wort filtration. And of course, this malt, this base malt, has to be homogeneous and consistent. So every time you brew a different batch, you're gonna end up with the same results. The specialty malt, on the other hand, as I said before, their role into the beer recipe is to bring different flavors and colors and aromas. And we have different types of special malts to do this. We have the kiln malts, we have caramel, roasted, and the smoked malts. And each one of them have a different characteristic and different flavors. So, for example, the kiln malts, they are the first step to bring some complexity to the beer. They have a different kilning profile in the malting house, so to enhance the color and the aromas of those malts. These aromas can be from light, malty flavors like bread, cookie-like flavors, up to some sweet vanilla honey notes. And these kiln malts, they can be used up to 60% of the grain bill, as they have less intense flavors than the other specialty malts, but also because they have more enzymatic power and they can convert themselves in other type of malts as well. The caramel malts, as the name suggests, they've been through a caramelization process in the malting house, as Jill just explained to us. And this type of malts, they normally will bring very sweet notes from sweet notes to dark caramel, toffee-like flavors and burnt caramel flavors. And we suggest to use up to 30% of the grain bill, as their flavors can be quite intense, but also because they do not have enzymatic power. Roasted malts, they've been roasted in the malting house, and they will bring to the beer some chocolatey, coffee notes, some nuts, dry fruit notes, up to very high levels of roastiness. And we suggest to use up to 10% of the grain bill, as they can be quite intense and harsh on the palate. In the end, and the last one, but not least, the smoked malt. This type of malt have been smoked in their kilning phase in the malting house. And we have here in Castle Malting, we have two different types of smoked malt. We have one which we smoked over beechwood, and another one which smoked over Scottish peat. And this type of malts, they bring to the beer very nice smoked notes, bacon and dry meat notes. And we suggest to use up to 10% of the grain bill, as they can be quite intense. These flavors, they can be quite intense, but one thing is important to notice is these malts, they have their full enzyme intact, so they have a lot of enzyme activity. So to sum up, once you're designing a beer, we can play with all of these different specialty malts to design any flavor and any beer style that we want. Normally, we play with a range of 70%, 80% of base malt to 20%, 30% of specialty malt. This is kind of an average that we can find. But also we can use adjuncts to brew beer, and they can play a very similar role to the specialty malts, in the sense they can change and bring different flavors and aroma to the beer. But also they can be used to give different mouthfeel, to enhance the drinkability of this beer, to lighten the color. But one thing that is very important to know is the composition of this brewing adjunct can be quite different from the malt. So we have to consider a few parameters in the brewing process to extract the most of these brewing adjuncts. So parameters like they do not have any enzymatic power. We need to know the starch gelatinization temperature of this adjunct, if it's in the same range of the mashing or if it's higher than the mashing, because if it's higher than the mashing, we need to decide if we go for the raw adjunct and do a adjunct mash, or if we find we're gonna use the flaked version of this adjunct. Also, we need to know the composition of this adjunct, if their protein levels, their glucan levels, to adapt our mashing scheme to extract the most of these adjuncts. We also need to know the impact on this of this adjunct on the color of the finished product, the beer. And also we need to know if this adjunct has husks. So we're gonna get a good lauter performance, especially if you're using a lauter tun, not a mesh filter. These are a very few parameters that it's very important to know them to brew with adjuncts. Here we have a table with the most used adjuncts to brew beer to use in the brewing process. And let's take a look at them. So let's start with maize and rice. They are quite similar to each other in the sense that in the idea of using in the brewing process. These two, maize and rice, they have low protein levels with high carbohydrates levels, and we normally use them to lighten the beer body and the color as well, and enhance the drinkability. And the difference between maize and rice relies on the taste. So maize normally has a sweeter aftertaste, while rice has a much more dry, harsh, and crisp aftertaste. Wheat also can be used as an adjunct, not malt wheat, and its composition it's very high in proteins. And normally use wheat to enhance the beer body, to also help in the head retention, and for sometimes even to improve the turbidity. For example, in New England styles, you can find a lot of wheat in that style. And also wheat brings its own distinctive flavor to the beer, right? Uh, Oats, we can use also oats to brew beer. Normally, oats has a lot of protein, very high protein levels, glucan levels, and high lipids. And this one is very important to know that oats has high lipids. And oats are normally used to enhance the beer body and red retention, and also to promote the silkiness of the finished beer. So oats normally bring a high viscosity to the brewing and to the product, and this on the palate we feel as like a silky mouthfeel. So it's very interesting. It's very useful in New England IPAs and oatmeal stouts, for example. Those very uh, full body beers. And finally, we can also use rye as a brewing adjunct. Rye has a moderate level of proteins and high level of glucans, so it's quite difficult to brew with rye and high percentage of rye. And rye is normally used to bring its own flavors. It's very crispy and spicy. So it's very interesting to brew with rye to brew specialty beers. Okay, so knowing all of that, I'm gonna give you a few tips on how to adjust your mash profile or your brewing scheme to use different types of adjuncts. So if the adjunct has no husks, for example, if you're brewing with wheat, a lot of percentage of wheat, we can use 1 to 5% of rice hulls to help in the wort filtration, to help to kind of open and build the filtration bed, especially if you're brewing with a lauter tun. If the brewing adjunct has high levels of glucans, like for example, if you're brewing with oats, a lot of oats, we can perform a gum rest at 37 degrees. So you mash in at a lower temperature to break down all those glucans, and this will make the brewing process way easier. If the adjunct has high levels of protein, so for example, if you're using a lot of wheat a lot of oats as well. We can do a protein rest at 45, 52 degrees to break down those proteins. But also if you're using a low protein adjuncts like maize or rye, for example, we can also do a protein rest, but for a different reason. So the reason would be to promote some amino acid production that would help the yeast to perform a healthy fermentation. Of course, all of this will depend the percentage of the adjunct in the grain bill. Okay, that was all for the tips on how and why to use specialty malts and brewing adjuncts. And I hope it was very helpful and somewhat kind of insightful to use these different adjuncts and specialty malts to brew different beers. And now I'd like to share with all of you a beer recipe. So we're gonna take a look on the traditional Belgian style Saison. And this style was born in Wallonia, which is the French-speaking part of Belgium. And Saison actually means season. And the reason this beer is called Saison or season is because it's to be brewed to give to the seasonal workers who was working in the farms during the harvest period back in the days. So it's a very traditional Belgian style. The profile of this beer is quite unique. To be honest, it's very aromatic, and there's a lot of fruity esters, spicy notes, all of them produced by the yeast in the fermentation, and also has a nice touch of hops, especially herbal and earthy hops. It's quite complex, and on the taste, matches exactly with the aroma, but also with a soft, very soft, moderate malt character, some maltiness. And also, it's normally used moderate to high bitterness to balance out all of those flavors. The traditional ingredients are a base malt, like Pilsen base malt, with some specialty malts to bring some extra complexity. But also, it's very traditional to use brewing adjuncts like wheat, oats, rye, and spells, for example. And the hops, normally we use continental hops, normally giving notes like herbal and earthy notes. We can use Sass, which are very aromatic hops, Ceterian and Eastern Kent Goldings to season this beer. And also you can use herbs and spices to bring even more complexity to this beer. Okay, so here you can see the beer recipe. If you can take a look on our website, we have many other beer recipes available online, and you can find this one as well. So take a look on the online on our website. This beer, if you follow this recipe, we're going to end up with a 6.5% beer with 10 EBC in color and 30 IBU. And as you can see here in the malt bill, I used 80% of Pilsen malt, 5% of specialty Cara Belga, and 15% of brewing adjuncts. Actually, I use malted, so to make the brewer's life a bit more easy. So there is 10% of Immer malt with Immer and 5% of rye. There's a few different hops used in this recipe, and also a very traditional Saison strain, is a Belgian strain. So to brew this beer, you can perform a very traditional mashing at 63 degrees, rest for 45 minutes, then raise up the temperature to 72, rest for other 20 minutes, and do the iodine test, very important to see if all the starch was converted into sugars. And then finally mash out at 78, sparge at the same temperature, 78 degrees is a good temperature. You can boil for 60 minutes or 75 minutes. You add the first hop for the bittering after 15 minutes. And before the end of the boiling, 5 minutes before you add the rest of the hops for some aroma. For the fermentation, you can use a quite high temperature for fermentation. So you pitch the yeast at 22 degrees, rest for the first 2 days at 22 degrees, and then after the 2 days, you rise up the temperature to 24 degrees to kind of stress this strain a bit. This strain is very good to stress to promote more different flavors, estery flavor and spicy notes. And after the fermentation, once the fermentation is done, once you reach the final gravity, you drop the temperature, cold crash to remove the yeast for 1 day, and then you can mature for 10 days at 2 degrees. And yeah, so if you follow this recipe, you're gonna end up with a very good beer, very good, true to the style, the Saison. Here we have a couple of examples of Belgian Saison you can find on the market. And personally, I like the Saison du Pont. I think it's a very good beer, true to the style, very well brewed, nice notes, and very complex beer. Also, if you around Belgium after COVID pandemic is over, hopefully this is going to be in the next few months. You can visit Liège, which is in the Wallonia region. It's close to the German border. You can visit the microbrewery Bras and Vous. My French is not that good. You can visit them. They have a very good range of saisons, and they even use Brettanomyces to even bring more complexity to this very complex style. And that's it. Thank you very much to be with us for this webinar. You can follow us in our social media. You can find a lot of information on our website. You can always contact us through the phone or through the email if you have any questions or any doubts or you need any help to brew your good beers. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Gabriel. We'll now check the questions. Yeah, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. I will copy paste so far.
You have a question, Joe?
Yeah, I actually
You're copy pasting them.
So yeah, this is a question a bit more on the chat. Yeah, there's a lot of information in the chat, so it's better to put them in the Q&A. So maybe that's good. Somebody else copy paste the questions. This question is more related to the process about the protein rest. Maybe Gabriel, it's more your area. Maybe it's
yes, of course.
better to answer that question.
Let me see. What can you tell me about the protein rest on your malts? Some say that the rest 52 for 50 minutes improve the foam stability. Others say that 52 remove body and affect foam stability. Oh, that's a good question, actually. So what I can tell it's about the Castle products, Castle malts, and they are very well modified. So in fact, this is a good thing for the process. So meaning that you can mash in higher temperatures. So for example, you can start your mashing protocol with the first rest at 62 to 63, 65 degrees, and even higher, depends on what you want for your beer. But you do not need to do a protein rest or even a gum rest, meaning that you're going to have less time in your mashing protocol, and the activity of enzyme called LOX, lipoxygenase, is going to be limited and not going to stale your beer. So talking about the protein rest, for our malts, you don't really need it. If you're using an adjunct, for example, you're using a lot of wheat, raw wheat might be interesting because the structure around the starch is intact, is not break yet. So you might need to break down and help the enzymes. So you're going to use a protein rest to help the proteases to be more active and break this matrix around the starch. But this is not needed for our malts. I do think if, for example, if you use for our malts, which they are well modified, if you use a protein rest, you will affect the foam and you will end up with less foam in your beer.
Good, really good. So don't do a protein rest if you really don't need to. Yeah, about the recipe, I see how many liters. Well, I think all recipe are designed for 1 hectoliter.
Yes. So that recipe and all the recipes on the website are for 1 hectoliter, so 100 liters. And you can, if you have a bigger batch or even a smaller batch, you can kind of do the proportionally. The ingredients will be proportionally. Just keep an eye on the efficiency. This is very important. I think all the recipes online, they have their own efficiency written on the recipe, but most of them are 85% efficiency.
Good. You have brewing experience. You have experience brewing Saison with rice as an adjunct. Well,
Oh,
not
that's a good
me.
one.
Maybe Gabriel.
Yeah, no, I never seen with rice. To be honest, I never brewed myself. I never brewed with rice, but it would be interesting because normally a Belgian Saison with this strain, if you use a proper yeast strain, Saison will be very dry and quite attenuated. So if you use rice, I believe this beer will be even lighter in the body. So maybe it would be too light to balance out that level of alcohol. But I have no problem, honestly, trying with rice. If you have a small system, like a homebrew system or a pilot brewery, I think it's a good shot to try.
So it's just for the unmalted adjunct you need the low temp rest. Well, I would say yes. Don't do a low temp rest if you don't need to, because if your malt is really well modified, it's more detrimental to do a low temp rest. Gabriel, you want to add something about that?
Yeah, so that's the idea. So nowadays, most of the malts are well modified, so you can kind of eliminate the protein rest. You don't really need it. You're only gonna need it once you use like a brewing adjunct full of proteins, or if you're dealing with a bad modification malt. That's the this is when you really need it. Or if you're brewing a beer which you want to be very dry, or if you're using a lot of rice, for example, as I said, you need to promote some nutrients to the yeast, perform a healthy fermentation. Might be interesting, but if you're going for all malt beer, you don't need it.
There is a comment here about we use red rice from Thailand in a Saison, and it turned out pretty good. Uh, red rice have a bigger impact than regular rice. Curious about whether you had any experience. I love my Saison bone dry. Okay, good. Thanks for
Nice.
the comment. That's always very interesting to see what brewers like to experience.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing the experience as well. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna need to brew a saison with rice, to be honest.
There is a. It's always at the end that the questions are coming. Okay, wheat versus wheat malt for body and most steel. Same question for oat and oat malts. That's your area, Gabriel. You can go.
Yeah, so the big question is, what is the difference between a malted grain, malted cereal, and a raw cereal? So the difference relies on the idea of, in a malted cereal, the matrix inside of the grain, the proteins, the glucans, aromatic they are breaking down. So this is what we call the modification of the malt. And brewing with malt, it's easier. So you're gonna have these proteins. They'll be smaller into in the grain, and it's gonna be easier to the enzymes access the starch. And you're not gonna have the full protein in the mash. If you're brewing with a raw material, all that proteins and the glucans, they are intact. So you're gonna spend much more time to break down this matrix before you access the starch. And probably you're gonna end up in your beer, in your process, you're gonna end up with bigger molecules, bigger proteins, bigger glucans, and they will have an impact on the mouthfeel and the drinkability and in all your beer and your process. So if you're looking for mouthfeel, you can use raw material for sure, but it's more difficult to brew with them. So that's the reason we kind of use the malted version of these cereals, because it's easier to brew with them, and they will give some hints of this mouthfeel that you're looking for.
Maybe a last question for you, Gabriel, about New England IPAs.
IPAs, would you use both oats or wheat or just wheat besides base malt, and why? And honestly, I would use both. I brewed a New England IPA once in Ireland, and I think that recipe was 35% wheat, malted wheat, and 10% raw oat, flaked oat. So yeah, I would go for both just to bring the two complexities in, like in protein levels. Let's say they are quite similar, but I would go for both just to make it more complex and to give both flavors to the beer. And in a New England IPA, you really want that haziness, and you also can play with the haziness. You can play with the yeast. You can choose yeast that doesn't sediment very easy. But in the end, also you're might end up with some yeast in your bottle. But I would say for a good recipe, you have to use at least 50% of wheat with oats, like a good protein level, a cereal with a good protein level. You don't want to boil for that long. You don't want to coagulate too much proteins, so boil for only 1 hour, 1 hour and a half tops. Don't need to boil too much to break down those proteins. And also do not bright this beer for too long, so do not cold age for too long. This will affect the final haziness as well. So everything that you think about how to make a good bright beer, you do the opposite. That's the New England IPA.
Okay, thank you. I had this once. I had my haziness just it went away because the cold just put the yeast at the bottom. I think that's a lot of brewers experience that problem. Well, thank you everybody for attending this webinar. I think that time is out. It will be about 1 hour, so no, it's 1 hour time. You can follow us about the next webinars. So we prepared webinars, especially on caramelized malts process on caramelization. So these are there will be more technical webinars coming. The marketing team will keep you in touch about that. Thank you a lot. Thank you, Gabriel, for helping me with this webinar.
Thank you.
See you next time, everybody.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.